Welcome to Blend's Localization Leaders series, where we interview industry leaders who are paving the way for advances in localization through their work. In this episode, we're joined by Spotify's Product Localization Manager, Mercedes Krimme. Spotify is a digital music, podcast, and video streaming service that gives users access to content from creators all over the world. Thank you so much for joining us, Mercedes. And we just usually like to get started with some background on your experience. So if you want to start by just telling me a little bit about your career path and how you became the product localization manager at Spotify.
Totally. So I think everyone in localization just always has a very strange path of how we get here. Mine started with growing up in a bilingual household, so was always really exposed to multiple languages and speaking them and translating between family members. So this kind of was always a theme in my life. Sort of continued through college and graduate school, where I was a language major, did some interpreting, did some translating with German and English, which was a really cool experience. Didn't know that localization existed until I started working in tech. I started out in recruiting and tech recruiting. Once I was in recruiting, realized I wanted to be more on the product side. So sort of started figuring out how do I get from where I am to where I want to be. Still didn't know localization existed at this point. And there was one point where when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, I was attending a lot of meetups in the Bay Area. So I was living in San Francisco at the time. Going to a lot of different tech meetups to just learn about the industry that I was recruiting in. And then I went to a localization meetup, and that's when it clicked for me, where I was this is what I want to do. This sort of blends working in tech and working with languages, which is a passion of mine. So I sort of had this path between, from recruiting to I went to operations in tech, working at Facebook. Then I got into project management, and then eventually I landed on the localization team as a project manager, where I was for almost 5 years, and ended leading a team of program managers there at Facebook. And now I've been at Spotify for about a year.
Amazing.
So that's been the path. Yeah.
Wow. Wow, that's awesome. You're able to combine all your passions. That's really cool.
Yeah. It's a very short version of it, but yeah, it's been really fun.
Yeah,
I'm super
course.
lucky and happy to be where I am. Yeah.
Great. So I guess on that note, what does localization look like at Spotify? What does it mean at Spotify? How are your teams structured?
Yeah. So I lead the product localization team. We also have a marketing localization manager. And then we recently hired, about the same time as me, we hired an internationalization engineering manager. And we have some engineers on our team and a senior program manager on that team as well. So the team has really scaled a lot within the last year. We'll actually be speaking at the upcoming Loc World conference about how we've scaled the team, which is exciting. So within our teams, we have project managers, we have program managers. On my product team, we have them aligned with different areas of the business. So this is just I think a good strategy to, when you don't have an embedded localization team, to really get them to work as closely with the product teams as possible by having those relationships and having them dedicated to a part of the business. And then within Spotify, the localization team is in design platform, which I think is a really cool place for us to sit. Working really closely with the design org and, being in the same org as the designers that are creating, our core components for design and how that works with IETN. It's just really great to be with the design team and sit closer with them and the accessibility team as well. So that's where we sit at Spotify. But we cover all of the products at all of everything that launches at Spotify. So it's really exciting.
Wow, that's very cool. Awesome. So what would you say is Spotify's greatest localization strength?
My team is awesome. They are super, super knowledgeable in all things localization. They know way more than I do. And the stuff that I see them raise and the questions they raise and the way that they talk to product teams is just really amazing, the depth of knowledge. And I think they're really passionate about music and about Spotify and about what we're doing. And I think being really excited about the product and having that music knowledge is really critical. So yeah, my team is great. I'm super grateful for them.
I use Spotify. I think many people use Spotify.
Yeah.
But just get in the mindset of that user and like working with, accessibility teams, etc. All those things that localization is so closely tied to. Are there any like specific tips or exercises that you guys do?
To partner with product teams more.
Yeah. Either
Yeah, I think
any of the sort of cross-sectional teams that are relevant.
yeah, I think something we started doing recently that I think has been really helpful is like I think the challenge in localization is always like we're at the end of the process and the product is built and then
Mhm.
I think the everyone's like loc nightmare is like 2 weeks to launch, here are strings and translate them. But
Yeah.
I think the team has been super, super successful at just like pushing ourselves further up. So like that's why sitting with design platform is really great. We've had awesome relationships with designers and with the UX writing team. And then getting really involved in the product planning process. So when we're road mapping, my team goes through everything that's coming up at Spotify, and we make sure we connect with those teams if we don't have a relationship with them yet. So really just building up those relationships and making sure that we're covering everything that's coming up and being really proactive about that. And then obviously the hope is eventually like the teams like know us and know who to go to, and that's happened in a lot of parts of the product, but there's always new teams forming and there's always new products that are coming up. So I think as a localization team you do always have to be a little bit like on top of what's happening in the business just so nothing falls through the
Yeah.
cracks.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. So jumping from the strengths to the sort of challenges, were there any markets that were particularly challenging for Spotify to break into?
I think India is always a fun and challenging one for a lot of companies. I think just like the language landscape there, and the dominant English mobile and app usage, and then how we sort of make that make sense with local languages. So we're doing a lot of work with India now. As a market that we want to focus more on, especially figuring out what does our strategy look like for what script we're showing. There's some appetite for seeing more more Roman characters instead of script. How are we like sort of creating the right language experience for people in India? So I think that's something we're thinking a lot about. We had a really exciting launch last year for Diwali, where we launched a really big cultural moment for Diwali, had Diwali playlists. It was really cool. So I think like getting more into India is probably something we'll continue to focus on.
I love, by the way, all of those sort of like cultural highlights that Spotify
Thank
does.
you.
I think it's so cool. Yeah, and I think I'm
Yeah.
not the only one that I've heard that from. I've heard other people say the same. So I think
Thanks.
a
Yeah,
lot
we
of
have one
people
running.
fangirl for Spotify localization.
Nice. That's great. We have one running for Ramadan right now too, which is going to extend through the end of Ramadan. So yeah, that's an exciting one that's live right now.
Cool. Awesome. So, do you have any advice for anyone new to the localization field or someone that's maybe interested in localization, not sure where to start?
I think networking is always the best advice anyone can take. That worked for me. I think just like really meeting people in the industry, going to meetups, reaching out to them on LinkedIn. There's a lot of localization events like local lunches that happen all across the world. It's a somewhat small but like really tight knit community. So I think just starting to get to know people and I think it's a really open community. Just I think because of the nature of what we do with like cross cultural communication, I think I found people to just be super welcoming in the industry. So just don't hesitate to reach out to people and get to know them and see what they're working on.
Okay, great. So now we can jump into our rapid fire questions.
Great.
If you're ready for them.
I think so.
So,
I think so.
okay. Okay. So, what's your favorite language?
I'm gonna say German just because that's my first language. Yeah.
Fair. Your favorite localization tool?
I'm gonna go a little non-traditional on this one and say dashboards. Our team has been working a lot more with product dashboards and looking at our metrics and seeing like how our products are doing internationally. So looking at our data and looking at our dashboards.
Important. What's your favorite place you've traveled to?
I think French Polynesia. I went to Tahiti almost 2 years ago now, and it was incredible. It was really highly recommend going there. It's a very long flight, but it was very fun.
But worth it. Okay.
Yeah.
And the best localization advice you've received?
I think this is just general advice, not even for localization, but just staying curious and like asking a lot of questions. And I think that's sort of how we are able to successfully like meet the users where they are and like meet our Spotify listeners where they are, is just asking a lot of those questions. And I think that's how we tailor a really good user experience.
The most successful market you've invested in?
I don't know about most successful, but I would say like the favorite, like think the one that my team worked on recently that was really exciting was we launched the Catalan language in Spain and Andorra. And so Spotify is a really big partnership with FC Barcelona soccer team. Catalan's obviously a really, big language in Barcelona and Catalonia. So that launch was really awesome, working with the FC Barcelona partnership. And there was just a lot of really positive reaction to that language launch, which happened last year. So that was super exciting.
Yes, that was in our Hall of Fame. So
oh yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And what's your localization nightmare? I know you kind of mentioned this, but I don't know.
I think I mentioned this. No, it's the same one. Like, and it's happened, but like finding out about a launch like 2 weeks before, and like there are so many strings, and yeah.
Nightmare.
That doesn't happen anymore, but it's a nightmare.
Who is your localization role model?
So when I said I went to, Loc meetup when I was first working in Silicon Valley, the speaker was Iris Oris, who's the VP of internationalization at Facebook. And she hired me ages ago at Facebook, and she's just an incredible person. And I don't think I would have really had my interest in localization sparked without attending that meetup. So Iris is great.
And which brand is your localization crush? So any other company whose localization you really admire?
Yeah, I think Disney Plus is doing a lot of really cool stuff right now. So probably choose them.
Awesome. So, okay, just to wrap it up, you survived the rapid fire.
Thank you.
Are there any localization projects coming up at Spotify that we should be looking out for? Any shout outs you want to make?
Totally. I know you mentioned you really like the cultural moments products. We'll have more of those coming up throughout the year, which is really cool. We are going to be launching some more languages, which I'm really excited about. And as always in product land, like there's so much happening in the audiobook space and the podcast space, just beyond playlist and music. So just the way that we're expanding the business is really exciting, and that gives us new localization challenges. So it's going to be a busy year, but we're ready. We're excited.
Thank you so much for joining us, Mercedes. It was so nice speaking with you.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was great to meet you.